Hey guys, it's Coach Matt with Lifelong Recovery. In this video, I'm going to give you guys an acronym for recovery to help you learn and remember what's important to sustain long-term recovery. So a lot of people think that recovery is just about not drinking or using, but actually it's about much more than that. And if you want to increase your chances of sustaining long-term recovery, of not drinking and using, if you want to quit completely, my long-term goal eventually became to quit drinking and using completely because I couldn't do it at all. So the way that I did that was through a lot of trial and error. So hopefully this will help you guys, reduce the amount of times that you're not successful with it, and just kind of get on that board to long-term recovery quicker. So I'm on my honeymoon actually right now. Very feeling very grateful, and it's one of the many gifts that I've received from recovery. I definitely wouldn't be able to maintain a healthy relationship without recovery. So just kind of feeling pretty grateful to be here in this moment and thinking about how recovery has afforded me this opportunity, at a second chance of life, which is really what it's all about, right? So for recovery, the acronym that I came up with, the R stands for replace. So the reason I say replace is what happens a lot of times, working in addiction treatment and just seeing people trying to recover over the years. What I saw a lot of times is people would just try and kind of pluck the substance use out of their lives. So they would just try and, remove the substance use out of their lives without changing anything else. And almost exclusively that does not work. So it makes sense if you think about it, because for me, I had been drinking and using from the time I was about 14, 15 years old. I think by the time I was 15 to 16 years old, I was drinking or using every single day, just about, right? I was under the influence of something. It was very rare that I would go a day without it. And that may not be your story, but it's not uncommon, right? So the reason I say that is because it becomes such an integral part of my life. Everything that I did was kind of wrapped around substance use. I was smoking weed before I would run errands. I was smoking weed uh, while I was in school, while I was at work. I was drinking, sometimes at work. I was delivering pizzas. I'm not proud to say I was drinking and driving. I did that all the time, unfortunately. But it was just such a normal part of my life, being under the influence, and it was a multiple time a day thing for me, especially like with smoking weed. I would smoke multiple times a day, taking some kind of pill, drinking. It was just such a staple of my life, right? So I couldn't, when I would try and just quit, I was just kind of like, well, what do I do? What do I do now, right? So replacing it, right? What I used to always say when I was working in addiction treatment was, you don't beat addiction by subtraction. And what I mean by that is you're not going to be able to just remove the substance from your life without replacing it with something and expect to be successful. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go through the video, but really, finding something to kind of fill that void. So this looks like a lot of different things. For a lot of people, it's spirituality. That was a big thing for me, finding some sense of spirituality, which was a long journey, and I had to really kind of open my mind to the idea of it. It's finding fun, it's finding support, lots of different things to just kind of replace that feeling that you were getting from the substances and the kind of comfort, that you had with it. So That's the first word, is replace. So for E, it's environment. So changing your environment, making sure that you're being in an environment that is conducive to recovery. Okay. So what I mean by that is, if you're still trying to surround yourself with other people that are under the influence constantly and you're trying to be clean and sober, it's probably not going to work, right? If you're in a relationship where your partner is consistently drinking and using, where it's out of hand, then it's probably not going to work, right? So making sure that you're in an environment conducive to recovery. You're around people that, not necessarily, it's not that they're always sober, but probably they don't have a problem with substances. If they drink, it's in moderation. um, Probably not using hard drugs, obviously, right? So just something where you can thrive being sober and feel comfortable. So the next thing for C is coping skill. So if you are trying to get clean and sober, chances are you're going to have to develop some healthy coping skills. Probably your only or one of your only coping skills in addiction is the substance use, right? So, anytime I was angry, sad, lonely, upset, depressed, anxious, whatever, I would drink, smoke weed, take a pill, whatever. So that was really my only coping skill. And again, this was from the time I was 15 years old. So it's not like I really developed any other kind of coping skills before that I could lean on. So for me, I had to really work on developing new coping skills. So for, you know, ideas for that, meditation, prayer, if that helps you, uh, going out into nature, hiking, fishing, any kind of outdoor activity is good. Being in nature can be very cathartic. Anything that kind of gives you peace, that you enjoy, anything that is going to occupy your time. I mean, that's a lot of what it is just filling time. Keeping yourself busy, occupied, so you don't kind of wallow in the craving. You're not kind of feeding into that desire to drink or use. So the next thing for O is open-minded. So make sure that you're open-minded, that you're practicing open-mindedness. And the reason that I say that is it's very easy to become kind of bitter, closed-minded, pessimistic, negative. Just kind of have I mean, to be honest, just to kind of have a generally shitty attitude, in addiction. Because I mean, it makes sense. It's hell. It's not a fun existence being in addiction. So your perspective, I think, just tends to get more cynical, more closed off, more pessimistic, like I was saying. So making sure that you are practicing open-mindedness is going to be key. So an example of that is if someone, let's say somebody has been clean and sober for a while and they give you a suggestion on, something to help, maybe they suggest calling someone and talking to them, going out and doing something, maybe meditating, and you're like, no, that doesn't work, or no, I don't want to do that, or whatever. Well, guess what? Then you basically you've already kind of committed to the failure, if that makes sense. So making sure that this is actually one of the words that I use, but you got to remember that we're talking about changing deeply ingrained patterns of thoughts and behavior that have developed over years and sometimes decades, right? It's not going to come naturally. It's something that you have to be very cognitive of. You have to be working on a daily and really moment to moment basis. So the next letter is V. So for V is vulnerable. You're going to have to practice vulnerability. So when a lot of people think of the word vulnerable, they think weak. What we're talking about with vulnerability is, it is, I mean, in a sense, you can understand why people think of it as weak, because really what it is letting your guard down. It's you know telling people how you really feel, telling people your fears, your insecurities, your worries, what's really going on in your head, right? Again, it makes sense. For me, I would drink and use those feelings and thoughts away. So now I need to practice, kind of processing them and getting through those feelings, getting through those thoughts instead of just trying to numb them or escape from them. So being vulnerable, being more authentic, telling people how you really feel, getting support when you're struggling, that kind of thing, instead of just trying to deal with everything on your own. Or, you know, uh, if I'm using a substance, I'm not utilizing help from anybody else, right? I'm just changing the chemicals in my brain. I'm changing the way I feel chemically through an artificial substance. So, I'm used to kind of quote unquote dealing with everything on my own, even though it's not on my own. It's not like I'm utilizing my own inner strengths or skills or anything like that. I'm just depending on a artificial substance to change the way that I feel, right? So now I have to develop ways to change the way that I feel through kind of like a natural sense, through talking about things, finding different perspectives on things, dealing with my feelings. Maybe there's in 12 step recovery, there's this saying that feelings aren't facts, so maybe understanding the way that I feel isn't necessarily the truth. It's just how I'm feeling in that moment, and I just need to kind of process that and come to a different perspective. Okay, so V is vulnerability. So the second E is for emotions. So along the same lines with vulnerability, right? Uh, Again, if I am using substances, I'm altering the chemicals in my brain on a regular basis. I'm messing with my thoughts. I'm messing with my emotions. So it's going to take the brain a while to heal from this. It's going to take the brain a while to come to a natural state of thinking and feeling again. And sometimes just being real, there's permanent damage that's done from substances. I recovery, I've seen people recover through remarkable states of substance use where I thought that they were permanently messed up. And there's no question that there was permanent damage, but recovery was enough to help them get through, if that makes sense. So they still were dealing with, just being real, they were dealing with permanent changes to their brain. I know I've got some permanent changes to my brain, but recovery makes it manageable, if that makes sense. So dealing with emotions, recognizing emotions and dealing with them. In addiction with substance use, we're not used to that. We're not used to dealing with our emotions. Again, we're trying to suppress them. We're trying to change the way that we feel. We're not working through them. So the second R is for rewire. So again, like I was talking about before, you have to remember that, I think what happens is a lot of people don't kind of step back and look at what was really going on. When I was using substances on a pretty much daily basis, for over a decade. I didn't think about, okay, that significantly changed the neural networks inside my brain. That significantly changed the way that I thought. That significantly changed the way that I processed emotions, right? So it had real life, impactful changes in my everyday thinking and feeling. So I have to create new patterns of thought of actions and feelings. This is maybe the hardest thing. With every client that I've worked with, this is the biggest struggle is a lot of times they will get down on themselves, they will get frustrated that they're still feeling, you know, depressed, anxious, they just want to give up, right? So patience is just huge. Again, think about how long you created these patterns of thoughts and feelings, how you wired your brain over, this long period of time, and give yourself some grace, give yourself patience, and understand that this is a process that you need to work on daily. You have to be, again, cognizant of, like, okay, today I gotta work on the way that I'm thinking, work on the way that I'm acting, and deal with my emotions on a daily basis to build up momentum, to structurally change the brain back to its normal state. I say normal, but as normal as it can be. But literally, understanding that this is on a physical, structural level of the brain, and it is going to take time. It's going to take effort. You got to be consistent. You have to be diligent, and that you're undertaking a significant task, right? So it's not going to all happen at once, and it's not going to you're going to have ups and downs essentially while the brain is healing. At times it's going to feel like a roller coaster. At times you're going to want to give up. At times you're going to say fuck it, it's not worth it. At times you're going to be extremely frustrated, and just getting back to a place of peace of mind, of like, okay, I can do this, I'm not going to give up, I'm going to keep going. And eventually you're going to see the fruits of your labor. You're going to see the result. People will notice how you've changed, you'll notice how you've changed. It's a beautiful thing, but it does take work. And then the last thing, for why, the why stands for yours. So your recovery is yours. It's not anybody else's. Especially if you are a part of a recovery group, you might have people tell you what recovery is, and it's kind of ironic because I'm kind of sitting here doing that to you guys, telling you what recovery is. But I'm trying to make it general and broad, and kind of like, this, what I've learned about other different people's recovery and patterns of recovery, and what works and what doesn't. But what I mean by that is, like, your recovery doesn't have to look the same as mine, right? So your recovery is yours, so you do what works for you. So to give you an example, like I was saying earlier, recovery for me, it was a very it was a very spiritual thing. I had to overcome some kind of like religious trauma. Basically, religion was shoved down my throat when I was a kid, and I had to overcome that. And like, for me, I defined a I came to a different conclusion and definition of what spirituality was, and that was helpful for me. So, now to me, my idea of what spirituality is more kind of abstract, and it's not about dogma, and that's just my own personal recovery, right? So that doesn't have to be yours. Yours can be secular, so it could be completely, absent of any kind of supernatural belief, any kind of religious or spiritual belief. It could be extremely religious. It could, whatever. It's your recovery. What works for me may not work for you. It may be different for you than somebody else, and that's okay. I think the main thing is just finding what works for you, what is helpful, what seems to be the most beneficial. But again, there are patterns of what typically works for people, and they're just broad things. So what we just went over: support, um, developing healthy coping skills, changing your environment, allowing your brain time to heal, finding activities that you enjoy, things like that. So, again, to recap, so R is for replace, E is for environment, C is for coping skills, O is for open minded, V is for vulnerable, the second E is for emotions, the second R is for rewire, and then Y is for yours. Okay? So, guys, I hope this is helpful for your recovery. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them down below, and I'd be happy to answer them. If you have ideas for videos, let me know. And I wish you guys the best of luck in your recovery, and look forward to the gifts that you guys are getting from recovery. So we'll see you in the next